We just returned from our trip to the Pacific Northwest and Olympic National Park, and I wanted to share with you some of our trip details and some of the recommendations and tips we have for an RV traveling family and visiting Olympic National Park. So we stayed here the third week of September for 4 nights and 5 days. We stayed on both the northern side of the peninsula, which is kind of the Port Angeles, Lake Crescent, Elwha Dam area, and then we stayed a couple of nights over in Bogoshill, which is over kind of by the Ho Rainforest entrance. I highly recommend staying on 2 sides of the park because the park is so large. You're not going to want to waste so much of your time traveling to a destination when you're staying at one other location. For example, this is our location here at Elwha Dam. Gives us good access to Hurricane Ridge entrance area, Lake Crescent, Elwha Dam area, and then we stayed at Bogoshill, which is seen here, and that gave us good access for Kalaloch beach area, and then and even Rialto Beach, and then heading up to the Ho Rainforest. We did this trip the summer of 2020, and so you can see here all the smoke. There's horrible wildfires going on, and of course we're dealing with COVID as well, so you'll notice that. This is crossing over from Tacoma as we are heading across the bridge and heading to the Olympic Peninsula, which is really huge. Port Angeles is the town that we stayed near. There's some different RV park options. We stayed at the Elwha Dam RV Park, and we have a whole review on that if you want to check that out. This is the map of Olympic National Park, the park map that they have that they give to you when you're there, just to show you an idea of how big this peninsula is and why you really want to stay on 2 sides of the park. So as you come in from Seattle area, this is what we did. Yeah. And then we came along the 101, and we ended up spending a few nights at Elwha Dam. So this kind of area. Just to give you an idea, if you were to drive from Elwha, come up the 101 and go by the visitor center, this takes you about 15 minutes or so. And then as you're driving the Hurricane Ridge Road up to Hurricane Ridge, you're going up the mountains, right? And you're climbing an elevation, and the speed limit's slow, and you're dealing with mountain switchbacks and stuff. So this takes probably 45 minutes or so. So just staying right here at Elwha and trying to get up to Hurricane Ridge will take you an hour or so. So that just goes to show how big this space is, and how if you were staying in Elwha and you wanted to travel and go over to the Ho Rainforest, you're talking about a 3-hour drive. And you would waste a lot of time trying to do this drive and not enough time actually getting to see the sights. So I highly recommend spending some time in the northern part. So kind of Port Angeles, we stayed in Elwha Dam. There's some options. I think there's an option for the park and Lake Crescent type of area. And then spend a little bit of time over here kind of by the coast. So your options here, there's an RV park that's just outside of the Ho Rainforest here. We stayed at Bogoshill. You can stay here at the Quail Indian Reservation most years, but this was 2020, and because of COVID, this is all closed this year. Same thing with this area up here. All of this was closed, so we did not get to see all that during our trip. There's also options lower beach area right here, like Kalaloch, where you can stay. And big rigs can probably fit in there. There's limited spaces though, and I hear it can be really tight. So we stayed at Bogoshill, and we stayed at Elwha Dam right over here. I'll get back to the videos. We were really excited to hit the coast and try to do some tide pulling. So we headed up kind of northwest to Salt Creek County Park. There was an RV park there as well, which I wanted to mention. And we were able to do some tide pulling and look at some tide pulls. You need to make sure that it's low tide when you're doing that, and you can check the tides ahead of time before your trip, and then they're really good about posting the tide charts when you go to the different hikes as well. The next morning we woke at our RV park in Elwha and did the hour-long drive along Lake Crescent and then up the Duc Falls road to the trailhead for Duc Falls. All along the park, they do a great job of having a bunch of information at the trailhead, things like the tide pool schedule if that relates to the coast. Here you can see some of the different trails you can do. We just did the short trail that takes you out to Duc Falls, It's beautiful. You have this amazing old growth, mossy trees, and just this amazing surrounding. It was actually smoky this day, but because you have so many trees, you really couldn't feel the impact of the smoke as much as we could when we were in the city up in Port Angeles. So beautiful hike, highly recommend it. It's only about a mile to hike up to the falls, and there's nothing really steep with bad elevation or anything that's that crazy. So definitely something that is family friendly, and it's really worth seeing the views. At one point we hit this bridge in this little creek, and my 7-year-old was a little disappointed, thinking all of her work was only for this view. But then we kept hiking and got a little further along and realized that the falls were very different. One of my favorite parts about this falls is that you have these multiple waterfalls that come down, and then the water goes underneath you on the bridge, and then you can see more of a view on the other side. So you're really surrounded by this amazing panoramic view of this amazing place that just isn't captured in the video. On the drive back down the road, heading back towards the 101, we stopped at the Salmon Cascades complex, which was a really easy, quick little jaunt off the road. I wouldn't even call it a hike. So just a couple steps off the road, you can learn a little bit about the salmon as they're traveling up this route. And then if you sit there long enough, you can see salmon. This wasn't really the optimal time of year to be there and see salmon, but we sat there long enough, probably about 15-20 minutes, and we were each able to see one of the salmon trying to go upstream as they're working their way up the river. Next place we stopped was just off the 101 by the Storm King Ranger Station and Lake Crescent to do the hike up to Marymere Falls. So this was another falls that we had heard about and wanted to see. It's really not that long of a hike. I think it was a little less than a mile. Does have some elevation and stairs at the latter, probably 1/8 of the mile is really hiking upstairs and going up in elevation. But the earlier part is just level, flat space like this. There's a little tunnel, which the kids thought was really fun. And there's this really huge tree that you can see as you're coming in. The trail is full with Douglas firs and western hemlocks and these really large, amazing trees that are a lot of fun for the kids to play around and check out. The trail also has some water spots that you need to cross, so that means bridges, and my kids always love a good bridge. Very sturdy bridge though, nothing to worry about here. You can see a lot of the falls from the base, but if you don't have mobility issues and you can do the stairs, it's worth it to hike just a little bit up, and you can get to this viewing platform where you really have a nice view of Maramere Falls. With its 90-foot drop, the Maramere Falls is pretty impressive, but there's also almost 24 waterfalls throughout Olympic Peninsula. So check those out. At our RV park, they actually had a handout guide that had all the different waterfalls if you want to do the waterfall trail and go to all the different waterfalls throughout Olympic. On our hike back to the car, we stopped at Lake Crescent for a little while. You can see the lake here. Unfortunately, it's really smoky this day, so you can't see all the beautiful views of the different mountain peaks in the background, but you can tell that the lake really is beautiful. The water's cool, so not exactly the kind of thing you're getting your swimsuit out and dipping in, although this is September, so maybe it's a little bit warmer earlier in the year. But beautiful lake. You can kayak here. We saw a couple people kayaking despite the smoke, but we decided to just take in the views for a while. We headed back to the RV for some lunch and to let the dog out before heading up to Hurricane Ridge. There's multiple signs for Olympic National Park because it's so large, but this particular sign is at the Hurricane Ridge entrance, which is near Port Angeles. And as you drive up there, as I mentioned before, it's kind of some windy roads. You're going up in elevation, and it takes you about 40 minutes or so to get up to the top where Hurricane Ridge is actually at. And so here we are hiking Hurricane Hill. So you can park at the Hurricane Ridge Visitor Center and walk around and do some small hikes from there. But you can also take a smaller road, not RV friendly, but you can take a smaller road that goes further out and gets you out to this paved trail that you can hike and this is the Hurricane Hill Trail. Now this trail is really beautiful. You get some amazing views. Even in all this smoke that you see here that we're facing, you can tell it's just beautiful. It's very steep though. So I have to say that it was fine for us to do it, to go up and to come back down. But as we were heading back down, I was making the girls hold both of my hands because I was afraid they were going to fall and roll off the mountain. So it's really steep here. If you have knee problems or if you're trying to push a stroller, I highly don't recommend doing that. So, but it's also not that far of a hike. So maybe just a couple of miles, probably even less than 2 miles to get up to the top. And then of course you have to hike your way back down to the parking lot. As you can see, you're going to do a lot of walking at this park if you really want to see stuff. The next day, we took the drive on the 101, continuing around the western side of the peninsula down to the area where Bogachiel State Park is at, which is also near the entrance for the whole rainforest. So back to the map here for a minute. So we were leaving Elwha, heading out on the 101, going around Lake Crescent, which you just saw, and then continuing on the 101 and heading down. There's a lot of great things to see up in this northern part of the peninsula. Cape Flattery is the outermost point up here. There's a cultural center we really wanted to see, but unfortunately because of COVID, all of the reservation area was closed. So we were not able to go up there. You're also not able to go up past certain points on the beach over here. So there were a lot of limitations. So we were not able to do this. Instead, we just came down to Bogachiel State Park and checked in there, and that was probably about an hour-and-a-half drive to get over here. We considered stopping and doing some of this beach stuff on the way, but there really isn't anywhere to park your rig, and it's actually pretty windy roads in here, tall trees, and not necessarily even a great place to turn the rig around, especially if you're towing. So it worked out better to check into the state park, get the rig set up and situated, and then drive back over to here and do this beach stuff using the Jeep. And I highly recommend doing that. A lot of this stuff along the shore is just kind of hard to access with your RV. There is an RV park that's here at the Quileute Indian Reservation, and it's right on the coast and you can look out on the water. We didn't book here, mainly because you can't have any photos or videos, and of course I like to do reviews, so I didn't want to do that. Plus I wanted to be a little closer to the whole rainforest. So we ended up booking here, and it's a good thing because this ended up closing up to outsiders. So it worked out well that we had the Bogachiel State Park booked. And we do have a review just on our stay at Bogachiel State Park if you want to see the RV campsites and what it looks like and everything. Our stay at Bogachiel State Park was nice because we were probably only about a 15-minute drive or so to the road that will start taking you up into the whole rainforest. The actual road then goes quite a ways up, but it's also, Bogachiel's also not very far from heading over to Rialto Beach. So it made for a really nice spot that's kind of at a midpoint between the coastal part of Olympic National Park and then heading to the rainforest. Rialto Beach is known for just being this beautiful beach where there's all this driftwood up along the edge and the cool little mountain cliffs and all the big wooded areas with these giant trees. And of course you have the ocean. It's pretty cold, so it's not exactly that you want to take a dip in the ocean, but it's fun to walk around. And if you do this during low tide, you can hike all the way out to Hole in the Wall. And there's 2 times a day when there's high tide and 2 times a day when there's low tide. And those schedules they post at the entrance for the trails, but you can look that up ahead of time. You can look it up months in advance ahead of time. And you can make sure that you're planning your days around being able to do tide pooling and being there at low tide time in order to do the tide pooling. So here we are at Hole in the Wall, and you can see that there's a little bit of water in some of those rock formations, and you can see the different sea creatures that are living in there. Now during high tide, this is totally filled up with water. You can't even walk around. So you need to know the tide schedule for safety, and you need to know the tide schedule if you want to see different things, because you'll miss out if you're not paying attention to that. So that was something that was totally new to us being from Colorado, but it's pretty easy to find those tide schedules. You'll need to look it up for the different areas. So if you're in Port Angeles, the tide schedule is a little bit different than if you're over on Rialto Beach. and as you continue along the coast. So we were doing some time in Oregon after this, and their tide schedules are just a little bit different than they were further north. But you can see here, Hole in the Wall is a really cool thing to see out by Rialto Beach, and it's great seeing the sea stars and the sea anemones and all the cool little creatures. We didn't bother them or take them off or even touch them in any way. We just let them exist and look at them and take some pictures and videos. So plenty of ways to enjoy without having to kind of be destructive and pull at that stuff and take it apart. So the kids were also good about that. They don't allow any pets out here, obviously, because the pets are not going to be as careful with everything that's living there in the tide pools. So they do not want dogs. You can have a dog on Rialto Beach for a little bit of space on the beach just near the parking lot, but you can't go all the way out to Hole in the Wall if you have a pet. The hike out there is only about a mile, and so it's not too bad heading out there and coming back. It took us maybe 40 minutes to hike out there, so just in terms of planning and trying to make sure that you're there at a good time for low tide. And then as you're leaving, they actually have a little water station where you can rinse your feet off. At the end of our hike, we decided to take off our shoes and switch over to sandals. The next day we headed up into the Hoh Rainforest. The Hoh Rainforest is a temperate rainforest. It gets over 12 feet of rainfall a year. It's the only rainforest we have in mainland US. Apparently there's a rainforest in Puerto Rico, but if you're here in the States, this is your only chance to see a rainforest. They do a great job of having a bunch of information at the trailhead, and there's also a visitor center here. So we were able to chat with the ranger and get the passport stamp for my passport book and get the junior ranger packets for the kids, and just any information and stuff that you need there. We did the simple Hall of Mosses trail, which is less than a mile, and it loops around, so it's quick and easy to do with kids. There's also a way that you can do the trail that heads out to an actual glacier. I think it's about 11 miles each direction. So you can literally start in the rainforest and hike your way all the way up to a glacier. So amazing, such a cool thing that you could only do at Olympic National Park. Here's the Hall of Mosses, and you can see what that kind of looks like on that information, and just these huge giant trees and covered in moss, and you can tell there's a lot of life. There's banana slugs everywhere. We were so excited to keep looking for banana slugs everywhere in the Pacific Northwest where we were at. But this is a great place to see them. It was a little crowded, so if you don't really like crowds, try to get to this one earlier in the day. Actually, by the time we were leaving this trail, we went to this trail in late morning, probably 10, 11 o'clock. And by the time we were done with the trail and heading back to our car, the parking lot was totally full and people were having to wait around to get a spot at the parking lot. So if you want to do this one and it's a busy time of the year, be sure to get to it early. After spending time in the Hoh Rainforest, we headed back to the beach. The beaches on the northern end by Rialto Beach are called First, Second, and Third Beach, and then lower on the southern side by Kalaloch, they're known as Beach 1, Beach 2, Beach 3, and Beach 4. And this is Beach 4. This was the first beach we came to on the drive that we were taking, and I loved it because there was nobody here. So it must not be as popular as the other ones, or maybe it's not as close to places where people are lodging, but it was great because we had this beach entirely to ourselves. So there's a little bit of driftwood here. You can play in the water. So great place to visit and see some things. As we were heading out of the trail, there was another family coming down, but overall we had the place to ourselves. We headed then further south to Kalaloch Beach. I wanted to see what the campground looked like because this might be an option in future trips when we head up here. And the campground's nice. You're right on the coast, so it's super easy and accessible to be on the water, but it does look like there's a lot of trees and it might be tight for us to get our 37-foot RV in there. So not sure we'll be able to stay there in the future, but it was good to check out. This is Kalaloch Beach. The girls had a lot of fun playing around here. And one of the things you can see at the Kalaloch Beach is the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life is basically just a tree that's up on the edge of the hill there, but the earth that's underneath it has eroded away, and so you can see the roots of the tree underneath. And with that, our time at Olympic National Park had come to an end. We continued taking the 101 down to Oregon, where we then spent a couple weeks along the Oregon coast at various cities and exploring Oregon. We'll have an entire video about that and traveling the 101. I would say the 101 throughout Washington really wasn't anything scary. There wasn't anything too difficult to do or anything you need to worry about for tunnels or bridges or anything like that for your RV. Oregon was a little bit of a different story, but we'll cover that in a different video. Here's the bridge we're taking as we're heading into Astoria. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this, please give me a thumbs up or give some feedback. Feel free to subscribe. We try to have other information for useful RV parks to stay at and other stuff you'd want to know about traveling the national parks with your kids and your RV. Thanks for watching.